expression, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, that is so wrong. So wrong. Because words really can hurt. And once you've said something, you can't even take it back, right? So there's some new research that's out. 1 in 2 of us have used an offensive term to describe a person living with a disability. And I include myself in that, most recently sharing with you a term I used to a colleague when referencing my ability at maths, and they were gobsmacked. And it wasn't until I got the reaction from them that I realised what I said was even offensive. And 1 in 3 Aussies as well are not confident they know the politically correct terms when referring to someone with a disability. Maybe you've struggled with that a little bit. I have a family member who has a disability, and sometimes references are said, even within my family group, that could be considered offensive. River Knight is the co-founder of Developing Australian Communities. It's an organisation working to improve Australia's disability services. Now, before we go anywhere, River, what's with the name? Are you a rock star? River Knight. You can't even make that up. River Knight.
So much.
That is an excellent name.
It's a name, unfortunately, that means I have to be on my best behaviour because everyone remembers it, unfortunately.
No, I disagree. I think it's a rock star name. I reckon you can rock that name. Truly.
Well, it's a great one for people to remember, and have coming from a family that's a little bit alternative. It certainly is one that I grew up with, and quite like having a.
Yeah, you've
difference
embraced it.
about.
You've got cool parents. That's what I'm hearing. I don't. My parents gave me a crap name because I continuously, for the last 50 years, have had to respell it for people because they always spell it L-O-R and it's L-Y-R. So boring.
It is. So, yeah, it's definitely on theme, isn't it? The words we use and the way we say
Yes.
things, the labels we use, they're a big part of our lives.
So I was really surprised. 1 in 2 Australians have used an offensive term to describe a person living with a disability. Are you surprised by that?
I'm not in some ways, because I think as a culture we don't always do it in a way that's intentionally disrespectful of people with disabilities, but it's the language that sometimes just comes through the media. It's something we pick up, and it's not until you meet someone, you have a family member, you go through the process yourself, that you sort of go, you know what, that could, if I said that to them in front of them, I would probably get a really bad reaction. I really shouldn't be using words like that. So the research we did was really interesting, and we found that, of course, the Generation Z, or the younger ones coming out of school, we found there's about 70% of them said they're actually feeling pretty comfortable about talking about this sort of stuff. So maybe it's an educational thing or it's a changing culture, but it's something that we've got to be aware of, because the way we talk about people in our community really can either value or devalue them.
What about when it comes to being able to be tone deaf, or what am I trying to say? Being educated, because terms and words that we used in the 70s are not necessary terms and words that we use now. So it's about education, isn't it, really, and reading the room and not being so tone deaf to what those connotations are from the terms and the words.
It is, and it does change, and it changes country to country. In some countries they'll use Paralympics, for example, to talk about the Paralympics. In Australia, we also talk about Special Olympics. So some people say, look, I like Special Olympics as a term, and some people say, I'm not special. Why am I special? Don't talk to me about being special. I'm just a person. So sometimes it depends on the country, it depends on the culture, the generation, and then also people themselves. Even within the community of people with disabilities, some people might say, look, I'd rather you talk to me about being a person with autism, and then other people might say, you know what, I identify as autistic, so don't say a person with autism. I'm not carrying autism in a backpack, I'm autistic. So even within the disability population itself, there's different people that like to be referred to in a different way. So we just say, start by having a conversation with the person themselves. And that's where we focus on. And the friends of mine, you know, I went to the shopping centre recently with a friend of mine who uses a large wheelchair. It's chin controlled. He has cerebral palsy. Doesn't have a lot of movement in his arms and legs. And I had this little lady come up to me who said, "Oh, you're a wonderful person for working with this man and letting him come out in the community. And oh, you're such a godsend." And he looked at me and rolled his eyes and she said, "Can he talk?" And I looked at him and I went, "I don't know. Can you talk?" And he said, Nah, sorry, man, can't talk. And I said, no, he says he can't talk, apparently. And she, you know, looked at us and she had a bit of a laugh. And then she sort of said, you know, "Oh, you're wonderful for working with him." And I said, "Well, not really. I'm just a mate." I was late, actually. He goes, "Yeah, he's late. It's definitely not wonderful." And she started talking to him. And eventually she realized he was just a guy. And just another person that she could talk to, and she didn't need to walk on eggshells. But she also didn't need to treat me like I was Mother Teresa just for hanging out with another guy. And it's about normalising the conversation and the way we see people in our community.
All right, so when you talk about normalising or correcting the terminology, give us some examples of how we should be using language.
So one thing that we hear a lot of in media, which I know people cringe with, is that we shouldn't be using terms like, you know, wheelchair bound. You know, they're not bound in a wheelchair. There's a person who uses a wheelchair. You know, we don't talk about people necessarily being disabled. We'll talk about a person who may have a disability. You know, we talk about the person first, and then some people, when they go to the shops, they look at the person, they go, "Oh, I don't know what to say." And you go, "Well, did you ask the last customer why they were overweight, or why they were short, or why they had a certain coloured hair?" No, you just sold them the milk that they came to buy. So maybe you don't even need to have the conversation in the first place. The things that we see in the sector are the little stuff like, you know, taking and supporting a person going to the doctor, and the doctor, the GP, talks to the staff member instead of the person who's actually their patient. You know, when we go to the grocery shop, someone might need a bit of a hand with their groceries, but, you know, the grocery person who's taking that money is taking the money from the person with the disability that's giving them the money. They're not shouldn't be looking at the person holding the groceries, giving them a hand, because it's the person in front of them that they need to. So I know it can be scary, but we just need to realise that they're just people. And if you're in that situation, how would you like to be talked to, and how would you like to be treated?
I think that I would like to be asked. Is that
Is that
a fair assumption? Can I ask?
Yeah, and I'll do it all the time. I'll just say, you know what, you know, and as a service provider, I've got another company where we do service provision. I'll say to people, how do you like me to talk about this? You know, or what are some of the things that people say that you absolutely hate? Just so I know, because I'm not really sure how to describe or talk, and I'm not really sure what to do here. And people are comfortable. They know they have a disability. They will say to you, "Yeah, it's a pain in the bum. You can, you know, this is what you want to, this is what I like when you're talking about it. Can you just say it this way? It'd be much easier." And they will have that conversation. But also we've got to be sensitive too and go, well, you know what? You may not need to even have the conversation because it may not be relevant to the interaction you're having. So, you know, if someone, you know, comes in to buy milk, you don't need to mention the fact that they're in a wheelchair because it's not relevant. But if you do, just feel comfortable knowing that that person knows they're in a wheelchair. And if you're uncomfortable, just remember it's your uncomfortableness and it's your issue that you're having. So just voice it and say, "Look, I feel really weird because I don't know what to say. Can you just give me a couple of tips?" And people will generally do that.
ABC Radio Darwin and the Northern Territory. My name's Lorella Cousins, and with you this afternoon, a rock star of Australia's disability service sector, I reckon. River Knight is his name. He is the co-founder of Developing Australian Communities. It is an organisation that works to improve Australia's disability services area, and today talking about language, things that are okay to say and things in 2021, you know what, we could do a bit better. That's what I'm hearing. It could be a bit better in the way we speak and act, and it's not rude to ask questions. Fair call, River?
Absolutely. It's not rude unless the question's not relevant. Because you can imagine if every time you went out, if I had red hair and every time I went to the shop, they went, "Oh, why have you got red hair?" You know, it'd get a bit much after a while. So it's about sort of going, you know, sometimes I don't need to bring it up. So I think if people see disability more, it helps normalise that. It helps people realise that, you know, we've got 1 in 10 people, we've got more than 50% of people over 65 all living with a disability. So it's easy to find people with disability in our community. So the Paralympics is great. So I say to people, watch the Paralympics. look at the people there. I can guarantee you will realise that these are normal people. They're doing amazing stuff. They're doing things I probably couldn't do, but they are people in our community. So the more people see that and they realise, the more they'll relax a little bit, and they won't get tongue-tied to sort of say, "Oh, what do I do? Are you vertically challenged if you're a smaller person or a person with a smaller stature? What do I say? Are you wheelchair bound or what are the words I'm supposed to use?" People, I think, will relax a little bit. One of the things that kids always say to me is, if you want to know how to talk to a child or treat a child with a disability, look at how their brothers and sisters treat them. Because I guarantee they don't treat them like they're special, and they don't treat them like they're anything different than everyone else in that community.
River, a text that's just come in from Greg, and reading it, it kind of feels like things are slow in this sector to change and be more appropriate. He says that when he was growing up in Adelaide, there was a home for people with mental disabilities, and it had a particular name that he found to be incredibly horrible. They're his words, and offensive. And he said that the name of that particular institution has only just very recently changed its name to be more appropriate. Does that surprise you?
Not really, because I think sometimes it's generational. We used to talk about people being spastic when we were talking about paraplegia or cerebral palsy, and that was just simply the medical term that was used at the time, and that goes into the culture, and it takes time to change. But we all do things without thinking, and sometimes it is slow. I still have people who may have a visual impairment and can't see very well. When people talk to them, they yell and they raise their voice because for some reason they think that if someone's blind, they're also deaf. And
What?
it's just little faux pas. So
Wow.
I've got people that I know that have visual impairments, and people talk loudly to them as if for some reason, if you're blind, you're also deaf. And it's the same when you see a lot of people, and so maybe it's a generational thing. When someone talks to someone in a wheelchair, often they'll use a high-pitched voice like we do with kids or animals. And we'll say, "Hello, how are you? Oh, was it wonderful you're out?" And the person just cringes and goes, I'm just another person, we just do these things without thinking sometimes. But it's really important to stop and go, how would you feel if you were living in a place that had a really funny name? I used to work in a children's youth service that had a lot of kids who were on the street, who used drugs, who had all sorts of issues. And, they would never go in the van because the van had, big funny colours all over it and rainbows all over it. And they were like, "We're not going in there. We're too cool and we're not going to touch it." So, the way we look, the way we talk about things is really important. And with disability, most of the time, less is more.
Oh, wow. Less is more. That is excellent when thinking about the right terminology with people with a disability. River Knight, co-founder of Developing Australian Communities and Australia's Disability Services. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of an insight from the other side and making it more appropriate. I appreciate that.
Thanks so much for having me.